Is the Middle East at the brink of a total war instigated by Israel and its backers in Washington? What are the actual risks to all sides in such a conflict? And why is the United States following Israel's desire to eliminate all its regional enemies at any cost? Furthermore, why is Benjamin Netanyahu in such a desperate rush to destroy Iran now, after decades of empty warnings? I am Ramzy Baroud, a Palestinian author, journalist, and the editor of the Palestine Chronicle. Today we are looking past the headlines of security and defense to examine the true drivers of this escalation: a crumbling reputation, a radical domestic agenda, and a frantic race against a changing American political landscape. Let's start with the first point, the reputational pivot. You see, the Gaza genocide has destroyed Israel's reputation. Everything that Israel has said and done to justify the mass extermination of the Palestinian people in Gaza failed, miserably failed, to restore that image, a false image from the start anyway, that Israel has managed to garner internationally, especially in the West, especially in the United States. There's a whole new reality that is shaping up here, where the world, including many people in the West, increasingly seeing Israel not only as the source of the problems in the Middle East, but also as a genocidal state. You cannot really kind of restore the confidence of a whole generation of people of your image as the only democracy in the Middle East and the like, when they have watched you killing children, dancing at their graves, and basically making it clear and open that your aim is to kill the Palestinian people in Gaza and to ethnically cleanse the survivors into the Sinai Desert. In September 2024, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave a speech at the UN General Assembly. He held a map titled, I think, something like The Blessing or something weird. It showed a trade corridor from India to Europe via Israel. On this map, the Palestine did not exist, or any manifestation of Palestinian territories. They were all non-existent. To achieve this new Middle East, Israel believes it must dismantle any resistance in the region, and what many call the axis of resistance, meaning Iran, Hezbollah, Ansarullah at this point, and of course the Palestinian resistance, Hamas and others in Gaza and elsewhere. To ensure that this happens, Israel tried to start the process of destroying Hamas, and it failed. Yes, it has killed and wounded hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, but it failed to achieve its ultimate objectives of having total control over Gaza. It tried to achieve the same thing in Lebanon. It also failed. Yes, it is violating Lebanese sovereignty on a daily basis, carrying massacres from Ain al-Hilwi to the Bekaa Valley to other parts of Lebanon. But at the end of the day, Hezbollah is restoring its military capabilities, particularly its missile capabilities, and it's experiencing or practicing what many would call strategic patience in anticipation of this total war we are speaking about. So now Israel is incapable of restoring its reputation. It doesn't actually care so much about the issue of reputation when it stands to lose everything. So the idea here, let's just try to achieve this total war, destroy Iran, which is in Israel's mind is the core of the axis of resistance, and by extension you are going to force everybody else to compromise, or they will be easily defeated without backing from Iran. That's the Israeli calculation. Later on we can worry about the issue of reputation, a bit of intimidation here, a bit of Maxim cover stories, you know what I'm talking about, a bit of threats, a bit of accusation of anti-Semitism, using the law, the courts in their favor, with all mainstream political currents in the West remaining on their side. It will be the matter of time before Israel imposes itself once again as a legitimate country. That's Israel's calculation. But there is another reason here, which is the domestic window. You have this, the most extreme, I know we have used this term before, the most extreme government in the history of Israel, but believe me, they get more and more extremes, to the point that the likes of National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir refers to those who are raping prisoners, Palestinian prisoners, refers to them as heroes, deserving of celebration and accolades. I mean, that's how mad Israel has become. This radical coalition is also in cahoot with an extremist kind of, there's an overlap with the most extreme version of American politics, the likes of Mike Huckabee, for example, who is citing not international law, not even American laws, but he's citing the Bible, Genesis, to speak about Israel's right to restore biblical Israel back to its glory and that sort of thing. In order for this coalition to stay intact, meaning in Israel, but also to stay intact in coordination and cooperation with the American extreme version of Israeli politics, it means that we need to take advantage of this situation to the absolute maximum. It means that since there is no accountability, why should we stop? Why should we not annex the West Bank? Why should we not force the Palestinians out of Gaza? Why shouldn't we return to genocide if we need to? Why shouldn't we push for a war against Iran and try to destroy Hezbollah if these are options on the table shared by both of us here in Israel and in the United States? Now, this window of opportunity is quite limited. First, let's talk about the Israeli window. The Israeli window is that you are going to have elections coming up in Israel later this year. According to various public polls, the latest conducted this month, February 2026, it indicates that if elections were to be held today, this extremist coalition would likely to lose power. A major war with Iran therefore serves as an ultimate emergency that could either delay the elections to keep Netanyahu in office, or to breathe new life in Netanyahu as a man who is capable of achieving one of the greatest foreign policy achievements that you can possibly imagine, at least in the minds of the Israelis. But you also have the American window. It is no secret that the US is changing, dramatically changing. First of all, let me start with this. There was this bombshell report published, I believe on February 23, 2026, this year, by Axios. It reveals that a secret DNC, Democratic National Party assessment of the 2024 elections, the findings are devastating for Israel, devastating for the Democratic Party and for American foreign policy makers who are aligned with Israel. That says unconditional support for Israel during the genocide was the primary factor in the democratic loss of the White House. Imagine, I mean, this would have been absolutely ridiculous to even suggest 3, 4, 5 years ago. Gaza factoring as a main drive or a major drive in the shaping of the most important elections of any kind in US foreign policy? Yes. And now it's confirmed. I've argued that, the Palestine Chronicle argued that, many Palestinians and pro-Palestinian commentators have been saying that. It's no secret, but now it is official. The DNC assessment itself says that Gaza was the primary, not a primary, but the primary factor in the democratic loss of the White House. And the Kamala Harris herself has admitted that in her book, if I remember correctly, it's called 107 Days. She admits that the open check provided to Netanyahu alienated the youth, progressives, and our Arab American voters. And I would actually go beyond that, beyond the typical discussion of the intergenerational change that's happening, you know, the youth, the progressives, and so forth. I think many Americans, even within the older generation, have also been very upset with the way that the Democratic Party under the Biden administration has, you know, kind of aligned with Israel at a time that the Democratic Party itself, like the rank and file, have turned against Israel. But then you also have the Republicans. I mean, the Republicans themselves are changing. Even the MAGA movement itself is now split between those who are seeing Israel as the ultimate ally and those who think that Israel is the ultimate enemy. That we are doing a lot for Israel, violating the America First principle, and we are not taking anything aside from being pulled back into the Middle East. Remember, the US kind of in a way pivoted out of the Middle East in 2012 during the Barack Obama administration, when they declared this new doctrine called the pivot to Asia, because they thought China is the real threat, let's leave. And in fact, they vacated many of the military bases and reduced American military personnel in that region so dramatically. Now they are all back and the numbers are building up, and now you have the largest military build up in the Middle East since 2003, meaning the Iraq war and invasion. So the clock is ticking because the Israelis are looking very closely at the numbers being produced in the US, in the Democratic Party, but also in the Republican Party, and also in terms of the generational change that is happening in America, kind of covering all parties, Democrats and Republicans, and those who are not ideologically affiliated. And they realize that Israel has a very limited window of opportunity, because this could be the last war that the US would either fight on behalf of Israel or allow Israel to fight for itself. And this explains why suddenly you have this great deal of urgency that is taking place. In 1992, Netanyahu started talking about Iran being 3 to 5 years away from producing the bomb. 1992, right? So this is the man, more than half of his political career has been dedicated to this same line. Iran is about to achieve the bomb. He repeated that over and over again, including, if you remember, 2012, the cartoon bomb at the UN, which claimed that 2013, so the next year, is going to be the deadline of when Iran is going to achieve that bomb. And that line kept getting repeated and repeated. Steve Witkoff just made that claim that Iran is about 1 week away in a recent Fox News interview. So this whole weeks away, 2 weeks away, 1 week away is a line that has been repeated since 1992. So this allows Israel to keep the threat imminent, and they kept this imminent threat for 3 decades. Allowing for this permanent or perpetual pre-war kind of discourse, making it easier to justify a massive strike whenever the domestic issues or the various domestic issues both in Israel and the United States come to the fore, and it seems that we are now at that moment. So, will this just happen and Israel gets away with it? Of course not, because if this could have been possible so easily, like a cakewalk. Remember cakewalk? That's the term, that the phrase that they used to justify their invasion of Iraq, and it was one of the largest, in fact, if not the single largest political foreign policy blunder in the history of the United States. It was not a cakewalk, as the neocons have promised back then. And if Iraq, which was under siege, under perpetual war, I mean, the war on Iraq never really stopped since 1990-91. They were constantly bombing Iraq. They destroyed the Iraqi economy, and still Iraq, which is much smaller than the size of Iran and did not produce its own weapons, was not a cakewalk, and it was a disaster. Imagine what kind of a freaking disaster the war on Iran is gonna be. But here's the thing. Because Israel knows that it's going to be a very high risk. Of course, the risk is going to be to the Americans more than anybody else. They are the ones who are going to be bogged down in this quagmire. Again, all these bogged down, quagmire, all of these are actually terminologies used during the Iraq war. And you would think that the American government is going to learn from these mistakes. I mean, they are going to be there for years and years and years. And at the end, most likely, they are not going to achieve anything. Iran is not Iraq. Iran is a different country. Iran has allies, and the allies are everywhere. And some of them, like Ansarullah in Yemen, are controlling, major waterways, the Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz, for example. Iran itself is in charge of the Persian Gulf, a very one of the most important waterways for the the transport of energy. Just the shutting down of the Strait of Hormuz is going to create a massive economic blowback. Some analysts are expecting that the barrel of oil is going to increase to about 200, if not even beyond. It just means that the global economy is going to crash, and of course the US is gonna lose so much in that process, and it's gonna be a completely different type of war. Israel stands to lose as well. Yeah, they have this Iron Dome of theirs, but we know fairly well, based on the 12-day war last year and previous exchanges with Hezbollah and Hamas, that this Iron Dome is not really a guarantee for much once the war or the kind of missiles coming to Israel reach a certain projection. But Israel is willing to take that risk because, again, in their mind, they feel that a strong Iran means an unsustainable Israel. So they feel like, well, it is better to take that risk, lose economically, the Americans and the West is going to help us anyway, and create, this situation where, well, we are fighting an existential threat. It's either let them overwhelm us later on, or we take the risk and do what we have to do right now. But ultimately, it's going to be the Americans, the region, of course, the Iranian people. Rarely do we speak about the Iranian people, but thousands of Iranians have already been killed in US and Israeli military adventures, and a lot of them will also perish as a result of this new US-Israeli war. The entire region is going to suffer. The destabilization is going to go back. The Saudis, the Syria, once more Iraq and elsewhere, everybody is going to pay a very heavy price so that Mr. Netanyahu may finally be granted this kind of gift of, the last departing gift of a very accommodating US foreign policy that has lasted for decades and most likely is going to end in the next few years. What we are seeing is not a quest for security, but a race against time. Israel is betting that it can force the US into one final world-changing conflict before the American political system and the world patience finally runs out. And indeed, in many ways, it already has. This was Ramzy Baroud. Thank you for tuning in.